Alright, here we are playing King of Fighters 1996. Released in 1996. Alright, let's talk a little bit about the NEO GEO system. This was the system that brought all these games to you. It was a cartridge-based arcade system. I remember the urban legends about how much each game would cost, or each cartridge. Especially at this time, most people could afford just things like the Sega Master System. You know, game cartridges for them were about $30 to $60. A NEO GEO game cost about $300, which was just incredible. NEO GEO was by the Japanese game company SNK. The name SNK has stuck around. NEO GEO not so much. I think NEO GEO went away back in the late 90s, although I could be wrong about that. Research. Now, something that was notable about the NEO GEO was if you found a NEO GEO machine, whether it be at the corner of the shopping centre or in the arcade, it was a red machine. You had a lot of machines that were black. The NEO GEO machines were red. And for me, seeing that red cabinet, that red machine in an arcade or anywhere, it was like a ray of light for me. I knew that's where my favourite games were. The NEO GEO was originally launched as a rental console for video game stores in Japan. It was brought into the market later on as a luxury console because it was so popular. Now I think there was a statistic in 2013, and that was that the NEO GEO was the most expensive home video game console ever released. The price tag for it was over $1,000 US. The hardware used for the NEO GEO was an evolution of an older SNK platform that was used for games like Time Soldiers in 1987 and later on used for POW, Prisoners of War. That was in 1988. I remember playing that on the NES by about 1993. Osaka, Japan, January. The NEO GEO was announced. It was released in April 26, 1990. It was by 1991 that they started selling the home version. Here's something to think about in terms of display and resolution. These days we're used to things like 720 by 480, you know, your DVD display, 1280 by 720, 1920, and so, you know, so forth and so forth. Well, the display for the NEO GEO was 320 by 224, 4096 on-screen colours out of a palette of 65,536. That's some numbers for you. Alright, let's move on to Fatal Fury, the King of Fighters, from 1991. The game was designed by Takahashi Nishiyama, the creator of the original 1987 Street Fighter. So Fatal Fury was developed around the same time as Street Fighter 2. A lot of people will tell you that Fatal Fury was a Street Fighter 2 knockoff. Not true. Although Street Fighter 2 was a superior fighting game, Fatal Fury was still very much one of the first. Fatal Fury was released on November 25th, 1991. Can you remember where you were in 1991? Just probably watching Step by Step or something. Fatal Fury 2 was released on December 10th, 1992. By now, Street Fighter 2 was well and truly successful, and pretty much the king of the arcades. So Fatal Fury 2 took some pointers of Street Fighter 2 in gameplay and some of the character designs too. What resulted was a really great game. Garo Densetsu Special, or Fatal Fury Special, was released after Fatal Fury 2. It was an improvement. It was released in 1993 and featured a lot of the characters from the first Fatal Fury game that weren't in the second game. So it was kind of a best of all-stars type game. Now if there was one thing that I really liked about Fatal Fury was the variation in martial arts. Different characters had different styles. I think this was the first time that I really fell in love with Muay Thai. And one of the main characters, Joe Higashi, is a Japanese Thai boxer. And from there on, that along with the release of Jean-Claude Van Damme's Kickboxer, I thought, what is this art? This is gorgeous. It was my first exposure to Muay Thai. The Art of Fighting was released on the 24th of September 1992 and was a loose kind of sequel to the Fatal Fury games because they were set in the same town as the first Fatal Fury, which is called Southtown. Southtown would be a recurring fictional place throughout a lot of these SNK games. One of the most notable things about The Art of Fighting was it played out like a movie. Each stage took you further and further through the plot, and that was something that I really liked. While other people were playing Street Fighter 2, I was enjoying playing Art of Fighting. I always felt that I was getting that extra element with the storyline. By 1994, SNK had released Art of Fighting 2. Art of Fighting 2 was a very difficult game and very hard to get into. I don't think I even remember playing it in the arcades. Now by the 12th of March 1996, we were given The Art of Fighting Part 3, The Path of the Warrior. Gameplay had changed significantly. It was still fun, and it was still a good game. In fact, I really enjoy this game. It's got a mood to it. I can't quite put my finger on what it is. I think it's a nice combination of the soundtrack, the gameplay, the storyline, and I guess where I was in life at the time when I first played this game. The sentimental attachment is something to these games. Just hearing the opening music to Fatal Fury or The Art of Fighting, it takes me back. The game could be the most horrible game in the world, but because it takes me back to a place, back to another time, it holds sentimentality to me. Also, The Art of Fighting 3 is notable as the only game in the series to have a CD drama arranged soundtrack. Now, many moons ago I was very fortunate to be able to win the Art of Fighting 3 soundtrack on eBay. And it's a gorgeous soundtrack, I love it. Something that didn't sit right with me was, I always believed The Art of Fighting to be taking place at the same time as the Fatal Fury series. Obviously while those characters were together in the King of Fighters games, it kind of backed it up for me. Later on, the creators, or whoever it was, came out and said that The Art of Fighting was actually a prequel to the Fatal Fury series in terms of storyline and timeline. And it was backed up and verified by the big honchos. I don't quite like that. I don't like people changing things later on. You know, if you've created a storyline, then that's the storyline. Don't go changing it 10 years down the track and saying, well, this is how it is. You were wrong all that time. It didn't sit right with me. Now to the game we're playing, The King of Fighters 1996, produced by Takahashi Nishiyama. When this game was released to home consoles, it never came out on the PlayStation here in Australia. All we got was The King of Fighters 1995. We didn't get 94, we didn't get 96. We were always neglected down here. The only way we could play The King of Fighters 96 was at the arcade. But when the arcade didn't have the machine anymore, well, that was it. But there was one thing that I always liked about the King of Fighters games, or the SNK games in general, was they were always a very classy sort of game. Where Street Fighter 2 by Capcom, also a classy game, kind of sold out to a lot of things. You had your Jean-Claude Van Damme Street Fighter movie, your G.I. Joe Street Fighter toys, your Street Fighter 2 colouring books, you know, all that stuff. The SNK games, the King of Fighters games, they always seemed like they were for a more mature audience. And I think they were, when you really looked deeply into them. Their characters were so much more fun. The background artwork was just leagues ahead of what Street Fighter was doing. And Street Fighter 2 stayed on Street Fighter 2 for a long time. There was Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting, Super Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. It went on and on. With SNK, they actually progressed with their storylines. They gave us something that we wanted in terms of stories. Or what I wanted anyway. Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, The King of Fighters, they all had progressing storylines. And SNK didn't dwell on one game a good period of time before giving the players a new game. I mean, when did Street Fighter 3 even come out? And by that stage, who gave a shit? Another great aspect of the SNK games were the soundtracks. Excellent soundtracks. Characters started to have their own themes, and when a character appeared in another game, they had their theme, and it wasn't necessarily the same song, but you knew it was theirs. There was always something very special for each character. And it was obviously something very special for the game players. Now, as time progressed and games changed, games went to 3D. As with all games, the King of Fighters games eventually went to 3D as well. Can't say that I've played any of the 3D games yet, because, well, life hasn't given me time to. I like the fact that the two-dimensional SNK games have a start and a finish. And it's kind of something that us old school gamers can kind of hold on to. I don't need to follow the 3D games now. That's something for the younger generation, something for my son. For me, it's 2D. Those were the games that I fell in love with. Those are the games that introduced me to martial arts that I didn't even know about. And forever they'll always be special for me. But the King of Fighters 96. Give it a play. If you don't like it, go back to playing your Pokemon or whatever the fuck you want to play. These were the games. I always loved this background. I remember I wanted to paint a mural of this background on my wall. I based so much artwork on just this background right here. Just enjoy just looking at it. And as you can see, I'm way out of practice. Don't hold it against me. I've had a life since I used to play these games. If you're one of those people that are, oh, he should have kicked or he should have punched when he did that. If I could get into real martial arts, f*** off.